guys. My name is Brandon Kennedy. I am 25 years old and I am HIV positive. I want to share a story with you about the day that I was diagnosed with HIV and also some of the emotions and feelings that I felt and some of the events that led up to that day. I am choosing to share this story with the world because I feel that oftentimes we don't share our stories and some of the things we go through in life, and little do we know our stories could turn out to be blessings in disguise to others. So here it goes. I am originally from Indianapolis, Indiana, and I relocated to Atlanta, Georgia in 2007 after I graduated high school. I started dating a guy back in 2009, and when we first met, we had the conversation about HIV and STDs, and to both of our knowledge, we were both HIV negative and were free of STDs. Um, some months into the relationship, he gave me an STD. We both went to the doctor to get tested for everything else, and he became HIV positive. And at the time, I was still HIV negative. We still stayed together for probably a couple of months after that, and then we ended up splitting up. But it had nothing to do with the fact that he was HIV positive. I was more than supportive of dating someone who was living with the virus. Um, but on the other hand, I was still worried about my own status. My physician wanted me to get tested once a month, every month, to see if the results came back positive. We would know it right away. So every month, like clockwork, I would call in for my results after going in for testing, and typically the results would come back in about a week or so. Well, this one particular month, the results just seemed like they were taking too long to come back. And at the time, I was working in the ER, and you'd be surprised what a person would do when they're actually thriving for answers. I remember going to one of our HIV testing centers and taking one of the HIV tests. So I took one of the oral tests out of the packages. I went up to the 16th floor of the hospital and I administered the test to myself. I set a timer on my phone and I waited for 20 minutes and I just pretty much thought about what I would do if my results were to come back positive this time. So the timer goes off on my phone. I turn the test around and I'm looking at it and there's two lines. With the oral HIV test, two lines. So the first line typically means that the test is working and it's accurate. The second line typically means there's a positive reaction to the test finding HIV antibodies in your system. So when I got those results, the very first thing I did was call my mother. Um, I asked her was she okay and everything, and did she have enough time to talk? She said, yeah. And I told her it was pretty serious. And she said, okay, well, what is it? Well, I said, I told you about my partner becoming HIV positive, and I told you there was a potential that I could be as well. And she said, yeah. So I said, well, I just gave myself an HIV test, and the test results came back preliminary positive. And she said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, it means that these results aren't finalized, but I would have to wait for the testing to come back from my physician to know for sure if those are the actual results. And the very first thing she said was, well, let me know what happens and what our first steps are. And she was really supportive about what we needed to do moving forward. After I got off the phone with her, the second phone call I placed was to my physician. I called and I said, hey, I administered an oral HIV test to myself and it came back preliminary positive. And I'm wondering, if this has something to do with the results taking so long. He said, well, it could because they could be doing confirmatory testing to see if you are in fact HIV positive, but I'll give you a phone call back. So I said, okay. And I waited the very next day and I got a phone call back from my physician saying, hey, it's confirmed that you are HIV positive. And I was at work at the time. I took an early lunch break just so that I can go and kind of compose myself. I remember going to a restaurant and I was eating a salad, and the more I was thinking about it, I think the more depressed I was becoming. I remember the tears starting to trickle down my face, and I called two of my best friends and I told them what had just happened, and they feared for me, but at the same token, they were very supportive, and they told me if I needed anything that I could call them. I can rely on them and they would be there for me. So I really appreciated that. So by this time, I had a pretty good support system established already. I remember going back to work, and one of the nurses said that she needed me to draw blood on a patient. No big deal. Draw blood on patients all the time. And as I'm on my way to draw blood from the patient, she stops me again. She says, "But I want you to make sure that you're really careful because this patient is HIV positive." And typically, a medical person wouldn't tell someone that type of information because it's assumed that everyone could potentially have something. So you practice all of your proper precautions so that you don't potentially infect yourself with anything that another person may have. And I was kind of taken back by that, and you can tell by this time my eyes are like starting to feel bloodshot red, and I was ready to pretty much give at any given second. So I remember running into a room, having someone else draw the patient's blood, and I ran into a private room just so that I could try to compose myself. And at this point in time, it was becoming a bit much for me. I knew that I couldn't stay at work, so I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, I just got some really, really bad news, and I need to take the rest of the day off." So I took the rest of the day off, and I called one of my good friends, and she came and picked me up, and we went out to a restaurant. While we were at the restaurant, she says, "I know you're not a big drinker, but would you like a drink?" And I said, "I'm not sure." I was like, but if it helps me get through this, then I'm down for whatever. So I actually honestly had 5 shots of vodka, and after that, I felt pretty good. And no, I'm not advocating for people to drink after they find out that they're HIV positive. There are counselors, there are people to talk to, and everything when people get these types of results. So by no means am I endorsing alcohol. Um, I still to this day am not a drinker. And after that, I pretty much got myself back together the very next day, and I remember telling myself that HIV wasn't a death sentence for me, and that this was going to be the beginning of the rest of my life, and whatever else comes after that, I'm in full acceptance of it. And to my advantage, I remember wanting to volunteer in April of 2010. Well, in April 2010, I called the local AIDS service organization, Aid Atlanta, to look into volunteering, and I didn't get in touch with anybody, so I left a voicemail. Well, I never got a phone call back, and in June 2010, I found out I was HIV positive, and then I'll be damned if, ironically, I get a phone call back in September of 2010 from a person who says, "Hey, I just took over the program that you called and left a voicemail about. I didn't want you to feel like someone forgot about you, so I'm returning that phone call to see if you're still interested in volunteering." And I said, "You know what? This has to be a sign from God." I was like, it's just ironic that I just found out I'm HIV positive, and I looked into volunteering back in April before I even became positive. And I started volunteering at the organization, and I started doing advocacy work about 3 months after, in December 2010. And I started sharing my story with people. The responses that I got back from some of the members at the program center and some of the people who attended the discussion panel were it was so overwhelming. And I said, you know what? If I can get this type of gratification and this type of feeling just by telling my story and um, sharing a little bit of my life with others, then it's something that I'm going to do, and it's probably something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So, a little bit about me and how I was diagnosed and how I started doing HIV advocacy work. I look forward to sharing more stories with you. Some things to look forward to are my decisions in dealing with medication for HIV. Also, some of the things that I dealt with building healthy relationships with dating. Also, healthy relationships with my family, my mom, and some of their reactions and how they deal with my HIV status. So I hope that you enjoyed my story and that you got something out of it. And overall, I hope that you share my story with someone else. Thank you.